What I'd like to do is to invite our expert panel to comment on some of the specific issues that came up there. And I'll invite you, panel, to try and keep it to sort of 5-6 minutes each, if that's okay, so that we have time to then turn over to the larger group and also to our colleagues who are joining us online. So a lot to think about there. One of the things which those people who are perhaps less technologically adept will have picked up from the presentation and from their experiences with using some of this technology is that it's often seen by non-specialists as a black box kind of solution. You know, it's something which requires specialist knowledge, which perhaps not all program staff have. Jay, I wondered what your experiences in LMMS and elsewhere have been around this. Do you think that's a fair critique, and what, if so, could be done about it?
I definitely think technology can be scary to people who've been used to doing things in a set way for many years, and the introduction of technology at certain points in terms of emergency response can heighten that sense of fear. If you're being accountable to having to deal with the pragmatic issues associated with a response, and then you throw on the dynamic of additional technology on top of that, where people aren't familiar with the technology, it's an obvious fear for many people to grapple with, and it can serve as a major barrier in terms of adopting technology. But I think the truth of the matter is, and I think this is part of your research, Gabby, is that technology is becoming more pervasive in terms of how we do our business out in operations. And there's no hiding the fact that there are new forms of software that are being customized for the humanitarian sector that we haven't necessarily seen before. LMMS is one example, but there are many out there that are starting to take, I guess, greater root in terms of how operations perform. So the issue is then, how do we sort of support or circumvent this challenge that we have in terms of operational people being a little bit resistant to adopting technology? And I think there are a number of things that we can sort of do on that side of the piece. The first thing that I think is critical is that operations people, IT individuals, are working with solutions that are simplified solutions. The simple solution is probably the best way to go in many cases, and oftentimes that may sound as a no-brainer, but typically in terms of the adoption of technology, if we haven't done our due diligence in terms of understanding how technology works, and if we're not empowering operational people to understand how technology works, making that informed decision can be quite difficult in terms of which types of solutions actually are simple and can be maintained in deployment in a simple manner. And I think that comes back again to your point about making sure that once we've actually done that research, we're sharing that knowledge with others, which I don't think we do a very good job of. Other ways in which we can sort of circumvent the issues are definitely we need to look at a new skills profile amongst aid workers. Within the LMMS team, yes, I do have a breadth of different types of technical staff that are on the ground, based on super users all the way to technical people. And those individuals are available for hire, for work in our operations. So, I think the profile of actually identifying where these people are in a local labor market may not necessarily be something that as aid agencies we've gone to look for, but increasingly we're finding that skill set is available.
Yeah.
Right. I think one of the things that we've sort of learnt in our own experience is that from an operational perspective, it's critical to get people who are programs operations involved in the process right from the get-go in terms of design, understanding the problems that we're trying to resolve. Get these individuals involved in design right from the beginning to sort of break down some of those barriers, some of the mysticism associated with technology. It's much more difficult to convince people after you've built the technology and there isn't that grounding of knowledge and background to support them. On the issue of the private sector, I think, look, there's no doubt that there's a role in terms of the private sector's involvement in the creation of solutions for humanitarian work and in providing support for them. But we've got to temper that with the reality that there are difficulties in terms of working with the private sector on certain things. In Haiti, I needed software licenses issued on a Saturday. When calling in to get these software licenses issued, it's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, thank you, call back on Monday, right? And those are challenges that we face, and they're a reality. So there are constraints there. I would say that in certain elements, particularly around software development, if we are talking about the development of software that is applicable across private sector, humanitarian sector, for general things, that's fine. Things like your accounting packages, human resource information systems, these sorts of things are perfectly fine in terms of crossing the sector borders. But in issues where we're dealing with really complex business processes that are unique to humanitarian operations, there's a definite role to be had in terms of developing the systems in-house, or at least being very actively involved in that process of developing those systems, because frankly we've got the domain expertise, right? We know what the business processes are associated with these types of requirements, and we know what the functional requirements are and the non-functional requirements, and that knowledge can't be disregarded. Software development it's costly, it's expensive, it's risky, and that's true whether you do it from the private sector or whether you do it from within our own humanitarian sector. But what I will say is that in my experience, the quality of the code that's coming out the door and the fact that we're actually meeting the need that we need to meet in terms of development, it benefits tremendously if there's at least a very strong engagement from our own actors in that process. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Thank you so much, Jay. A lot there which I'm sure we'll want to come back to in the discussion, particularly this issue of common action, common in two ways, sort of involvement in processes and sort of bringing different kinds of stakeholders together to be involved, but also between agencies, which Gabby brought up a lot as well. So maybe that's an issue that we'll come to in a minute. Thank you very much.